My uncle stole millions from our family business and blamed me for it, so I followed the money and left him with nothing but handcuffs. I'm a 32-year-old man, and up until a few months ago, I thought my life was stable. I worked for my family's business, a company my grandfather started and my father expanded. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Then, everything fell apart. It started with a phone call. I was at home when my father called, his voice sharp, telling me to come to the house immediately. When I arrived, the entire family was there, my parents, my two siblings, a couple of uncles, my aunt, and even my cousins. The atmosphere was heavy and tense. No one was smiling. My father didn't waste time. He said the business was struggling, debts were piling up faster than expected, and if things didn't turn around, we would be bankrupt. He looked directly at me and said it was my fault. The words hit like a slap. I didn't understand at first. He explained that the investment I had suggested, one he and my uncle had both approved, had gone wrong. The money was gone, and because of that, debts had piled up, suppliers weren't getting paid, and the bank was seizing assets. I tried to explain, yes, I had found the investment opportunity, but I didn't make the final call. My father and uncle had reviewed it, they had signed off on it. But no one wanted to hear that. My mother was crying, my siblings refused to look at me, and my uncle shook his head like I was some kind of disgrace. Then my father said something I'll never forget. "You've ruined this family forever." The words barely registered before he told me to get out. I'd been staying at my parents' house temporarily after a breakup. That wasn't an option anymore. My younger brother stood up, walked past me, and opened the front door, like he was personally escorting me out. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something, anything. She turned her head away. By the time I stepped outside, my phone started lighting up with messages. My cousins, my aunts, even family friends had heard about it. It spread fast. They weren't just blaming me, they were making it public. The story going around was that I had convinced my father to throw everything into some reckless scheme, that I had gambled away my family's future. The reality was, I had no idea how things collapsed so quickly. Even if the investment hadn't panned out as expected, the business wasn't in bad shape before. We had reserves, we had assets. Something didn't add up. I tried calling my mother, no answer. I called my siblings, blocked. I went to my father's office hoping to talk in person, but the locks had been changed. Then came the final blow. I was fired, officially. They said they were downsizing, but I knew what it was. My father didn't want me anywhere near the business. My reputation was shot. Anyone in the industry who had ties to my family didn't want to be associated with me. Finding a new job was going to be next to impossible. With nowhere else to go, I moved into a tiny apartment using what little savings I had. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Even if my investment had failed, it shouldn't have drained everything. So, I started looking into the company's financial records. I had saved some old reports from when I worked there and asked a former colleague for anything they could share. I spent nights going through old reports, trying to piece together where the money went. Then I found something strange, expenses that didn't make sense, withdrawals that didn't align with any known business operations. It wasn't just one or two mistakes. This had been happening for years. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, so I called an old college friend who worked as an accountant. He agreed to take a look. After a few days, he called me back and told me straight up, this wasn't just bad management. Someone had been siphoning money for a long time. I brought it to my father, thinking he'd want to know. The moment I mentioned it, he exploded, accused me of trying to cover up my own failure, and said I was desperate to shift the blame. He wouldn't even look at the numbers I brought. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just dealing with denial. Someone didn't want this information getting out. I was ready to drop it until my cousin reached out. He told me he had always been suspicious of how the money was handled. He offered to help me dig deeper. Together, we started tracing the missing funds. The deeper we went, the more obvious it became. Someone had been draining the business for years, long before I ever suggested that investment. Then we found a name, someone who appeared repeatedly in financial transactions. My father was the loudest. He didn't care that my uncle had stolen from the business, that he had betrayed the entire family. He only cared that I had taken it public. My cousin and I suspected my uncle had someone watching us, feeding him updates. The first message was a warning. The second one was a threat. A few days after that, an anonymous text told me to drop it. An email showed up in my inbox. No name, no sender information, just a short message. Stop digging unless you want to regret it. That confirmed it. Whoever was behind the missing money wasn't just some careless accountant making mistakes. Someone knew I was getting close, and they wanted me to stop. I wasn't going to. My cousin had been pulling financial records from different sources, cross-referencing transactions, looking for anything that connected the missing funds. Late one night, he called me. He had found something big. There was an offshore account hidden under a shell company's name. Large amounts of money had been flowing into it for years. Transfers were disguised as business expenses, but had nothing to do with the company. Some of the amounts matched the unexplained withdrawals from the family business, almost down to the cent. Tracing the account ownership led to a name. It wasn't my father, it wasn't some outside scammer. It was my uncle, the same uncle who had been in that room, shaking his head in disappointment, letting everyone think I was the one who destroyed the business. The same uncle who had co-signed the investment decision but acted like I had done it alone. The money had been vanishing long before my investment ever happened. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. My uncle hadn't just been stealing, he had been using the money to fund an entirely separate life, a second house, luxury vacations, private school tuition for kids no one in our family even knew existed, a second family. For years, he had been funneling money out of the business to keep them comfortable while making sure no one in our family ever found out. I knew I couldn't just sit on this. I had to confront him. I caught him outside his office, away from anyone else. I laid it all out, the account, the transactions, the fake expenses, the second life. He barely reacted. No shock, no denial at first. Just a long stare before his expression hardened. Then he flipped it, called me desperate, a failure looking for a scapegoat, and said I had already burned my bridges with the family and no one would believe a word I said. He walked away before I could say anything else. But I wasn't finished. My cousin and I gathered everything, screenshots, transaction logs, company reports, even photos of the second house and the people living in it. We organized it in a way that no one could ignore. I went to my parents again. My mother hesitated when she saw the documents. She took them, turned through a few pages, but said nothing. My father didn't even touch them. He didn't want to hear it. He told me I had done enough damage, that I was grasping at lies to make up for what I did, that I was trying to ruin the family even more. I asked him how he could say that without even looking at the evidence. He walked away. I thought I had hit another dead end until later that night when my sister reached out to me. She had been one of the first to block me when everything went down. She hadn't spoken to me in weeks, but now she wanted to talk. She had started hearing rumors, whispers from people in the extended family that something wasn't adding up, that our uncle had been handling company finances on his own for years, that he had been seen with people no one recognized, spending money that didn't match what he was supposed to have. She wasn't sure what to believe yet, but for the first time, she wasn't against me. Word started spreading. Some of our extended family began questioning things, others refused to listen, standing by my uncle, repeating his lies that I was just making things up to avoid blame. Then my uncle made his move. He started getting ahead of the accusations, twisting the story before I could. He told people I had doctored financial documents, that I was so desperate to clear my name that I was inventing a conspiracy. Some people believed him, some didn't. At that point, it didn't matter. I wasn't going to fight this through family gossip. I needed something bigger. My cousin and I took everything to a lawyer. They reviewed the records, confirmed that we had real evidence of fraud, and told us exactly what legal steps we could take. Before I could move forward, my father called me for one last conversation. He told me to drop it, said that if I went after my uncle, if I pushed this any further, I would be permanently cut off from the family. No contact, no coming back. I told him my decision was already made. The complaint was filed. There was no turning back. My cousin and I handed over everything to financial fraud investigators, and within weeks they began looking into it. It was a slow process, but piece by piece, they built a case. The records were solid, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the fake business expenses. It was all there, enough to launch a full-scale investigation into my uncle's dealings. As soon as the inquiry began, my uncle panicked. He withdrew what he could and tried to leave the country. He almost made it, but before he could board an international flight, authorities froze his assets. His bank accounts were locked, his credit cards stopped working, and suddenly the money he had been hiding for years was completely out of reach. That's when the real chaos started. Word got back to the family fast. My father, my mother, my siblings, everyone knew within hours. It didn't take long before my phone started blowing up. Calls, messages, voicemails. Most of them weren't from people wanting the truth. They were from people demanding to know why I had ruined the family's reputation. My father was furious. At first, he refused to believe it, saying the numbers must have been doctored. But as more family members started accepting the truth, he shifted, now blaming me for handling it publicly instead of keeping it in the family. He called it an embarrassment, said I had gone too far, that this could have been handled quietly, that I had humiliated the family name. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Then my sister called. Unlike the others, she wasn't yelling. She had been digging into old family financial records and had found something worse. Our father had known about at least some of the missing money. He hadn't been in on the scheme, but he had seen the discrepancies and chosen to ignore them. He had let it happen. That was why he didn't want me pushing this further. The fallout wasn't just within the family. News of the investigation leaked. A local media outlet picked up the story. My uncle wasn't just a private businessman, he had connections, people who trusted him, people who had worked with him for years. The exposure wasn't just humiliating for him, it made the whole family look complicit. Business partners backed away, people who had worked with our family for generations stopped taking calls, and clients pulled their contracts. My father could no longer pretend that I was the one who had destroyed everything. For the first time since this started, he stopped blaming me. He didn't apologize, he never would, but he couldn't deny it anymore. The family started turning on each other. Some of my uncles and aunts, people who had blindly defended my uncle, realized they had lost money too. Investments that were supposed to be handled by my uncle had been siphoned off, funneled into his secret accounts. Lawsuits started flying. Then my lawyer called. The case against my uncle had reached the next stage. Formal charges, fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, the works. He wasn't just losing money anymore, he was facing real prison time. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, more secrets came out. Authorities found other hidden investments under fake names, more accounts that my uncle had set up over the years. He had been stealing for even longer than we thought. Millions had vanished into his secret empire, but none of it mattered anymore. The money was locked, he was done. The damage, though, was permanent. The family business was in ruins. Associates who had trusted my father wouldn't come near him anymore. The reputation he had been so desperate to protect was shattered anyway. And I realized something. No matter how much proof I had, no matter how much my uncle had hurt the family, I would never be accepted back. My father couldn't forgive me for being right. My mother wouldn't stand up for me. My extended family was too broken, too bitter to see past the destruction. So, I stopped trying. I blocked my father's number. I cut ties with the relatives who refused to believe the truth. They made their choice. Now, I was making mine. For the first time since this started, I walked away from them for good. The audit was officially ordered. The investigators were no longer just reviewing old records, they were going through every transaction, every financial move the business had made over the last several years. My uncle was no longer just under suspicion, he was under direct scrutiny. That was when he went on the defensive. Instead of keeping quiet and letting the process unfold, he went public. He called in favors, reached out to anyone who would listen, and started telling his version of the story. I wasn't some whistleblower exposing fraud, no, according to him, I was mentally unstable, a liar with a grudge, desperate to destroy my own family because I couldn't handle my own failures. He painted himself as the victim, the hard-working uncle who had always looked out for the family, now being unfairly accused by an ungrateful nephew. Some people believed him, others didn't. But by that point, the investigation had taken on a life of its own. Over time, my mother's attitude changed. At first, she defended my uncle, but as more proof surfaced, she became quieter. Then, one night, she admitted she had always suspected my uncle wasn't as honest as he pretended to be. She had overheard conversations, seen small financial inconsistencies over the years, but she had convinced herself it was nothing. She never thought he would actually steal from his own family. She still wasn't ready to confront him, but it was the first time she acknowledged, even quietly, that something was wrong. Then my father reached out. He wanted to meet in person, no one else. I agreed. He didn't waste time. He told me my uncle had offered a solution. If I dropped the accusations, if I let the investigation go, my uncle would fix everything. I wouldn't be blamed anymore. The business could recover. I didn't ask what that meant because I didn't care. I told him no. That same night, I received another anonymous message. You need to stop. This won't end well for you. Whoever sent it wasn't trying to convince me anymore. It was a warning. At that point, I wasn't backing down. Then my sister called again. She had been going through old family emails and stumbled across something huge, an exchange between our uncle and father from years ago, messages where my uncle openly mentioned the missing funds, saying it was handled and that no one would ever find out. My father had known the entire time. It explained everything, why he had fought so hard to defend my uncle, why he had refused to even look at the documents I showed him. The investigation kept expanding. More records surfaced. My uncle hadn't just been taking money, he had set up fake companies to launder it, shell businesses that didn't exist, designed to move the funds around so they were harder to trace. My father still refused to believe any of it. He tried one last move, gathering the extended family to turn them against me. He told them I had exaggerated everything, that I had dragged our family through the mud for nothing, but it was too late. The evidence was everywhere. Family members who had once been against me started to reconsider. Some even began discussing legal action, lawsuits to recover the money my uncle had stolen. At first, my uncle fought back hard, hiring lawyers and trying to manipulate the story. But when investigators started freezing accounts, he suddenly stopped showing up at family gatherings and went quiet. He stopped responding to messages. He skipped family gatherings. He knew he was caught. Then came the biggest discovery yet. My cousin had been looking into my uncle's properties, trying to track down anything else he might be hiding. That was when he found it, a hidden safe. Inside were documents, contracts, wire transfers, paper trails connecting my uncle directly to offshore accounts under different names. There was no denying it now. My mother finally broke. She couldn't protect her brother anymore. She accepted that he had done this, that I had been right all along. But my father, he refused to let go. I overheard him talking to another relative, his voice low but clear. Family reputation matters more than the truth. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. A final family meeting was called. I knew what was coming. Some people still wanted to believe my uncle had done nothing wrong. Others had finally turned against him. I brought the documents. I laid everything out one last time. The reaction was instant. Some relatives exploded, demanding to know how my father had let this happen. Others still clung to my uncle's lies, refusing to believe what was right in front of them. It didn't matter anymore. The family wasn't just broken, it was shattered. Some people cut ties completely, and I did too. I walked out of that room, knowing one thing for certain: there was no family left to save. The call came early in the morning. The investigator's voice was clear. My uncle had been officially charged with fraud and embezzlement. The arrest happened shortly after. It wasn't a quiet, behind-the-scenes deal. The authorities made sure of that. Local news picked up the story, broadcasting footage of him being taken into custody. Reporters covered everything: his role in the family business, the stolen money, the hidden accounts. It was everywhere. The family name, the one my father had been so desperate to protect, was now plastered across every headline for all the wrong reasons. And my father was furious, not at my uncle, not at the fact that we had spent years unknowingly working under a man who had been stealing from us. No, he was furious at me. He called, but I didn't answer. The voicemail was enough. He was raging, calling me the real traitor, saying that if I had just let it go, if I had just stayed quiet, this never would have happened. Even with his own brother in handcuffs, he still refused to believe the truth. But the truth didn't care. The authorities froze my uncle's accounts. Every stolen dollar they could trace, every hidden asset, everything tied to his fraud. It was locked. The man who had been living in luxury, funding a secret second life, now had nothing. The legal pressure started closing in. He tried to make a deal through his lawyer, offered to return a portion of the money in exchange for a reduced sentence. But it wasn't enough. The investigators weren't looking for a slap on the wrist. They had everything they needed to put him away for years. And then my father did something I never saw coming. He tried to convince my mother to put up bail. The same man who had thrown me out, the same man who had stood by my uncle through every lie, wanted to use family money to help him walk free. I don't know what conversation they had. I don't know what words were exchanged behind closed doors, but for the first time since this started, my mother didn't give in. She refused. The line had been drawn. My younger sister fully supported me. She had seen the evidence with her own eyes. She had been the one to dig up some of the most damning proof. But our older brother, he refused to believe it. He stood by our father. To him, this was still a family betrayal. It didn't matter how much money had been stolen, how many lives were ruined. He thought I had broken something that should have been left alone. The extended family started turning on each other. Some relatives, especially the ones who had lost money, admitted I had been right. Others, they still insisted my uncle was innocent. They called the investigation a setup, said that I had exaggerated everything, that I had wanted to see the family destroyed. But it didn't matter what they believed. The legal proceedings had started. I was called to testify. I sat in a courtroom and laid out everything: the missing money, the offshore accounts, the fake businesses, the threats, every single detail. My uncle's lawyer tried to poke holes in it, tried to make it seem like I had some personal vendetta, but the numbers didn't lie. The records didn't lie. The documents I had brought forward were airtight. His entire defense collapsed. And then came the final conversation with my father. It wasn't an argument, it wasn't yelling, it was cold. He looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer his son, for destroying the family, for exposing the truth, for ruining my uncle's life. That was it, the end. Some relatives cut ties with me completely. Others, ones I had barely spoken to in years, reached out, thanked me, said that if I hadn't uncovered everything, they never would have known what my uncle had done. And that's when I finally understood something. The people who truly cared about me, they never would have blamed me for something I didn't do. The sentencing came faster than expected. My uncle stood in court, dressed in a suit that no longer fit as well as it used to. His expensive lawyers tried to soften the charges, to argue that he had simply made poor financial choices rather than intentionally stealing. But the evidence was overwhelming: the fake companies, the offshore accounts, the money trail leading directly to him. It was all laid out. When the verdict was read, there was no dramatic breakdown, no apology. Guilty, fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, multiple years in prison. The courtroom was silent, but I knew what was coming next. He turned to look at me as he was led away, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief, like this was my fault. Even now, even after everything had been exposed, he refused to take responsibility. His final words before being taken out of the courtroom: "You ruined everything." Even in the face of undeniable truth, he still saw himself as the victim. And my father, he didn't even show up to the sentencing. He refused to acknowledge any of it. In his mind, his brother had been framed, that I had been manipulated, that someone else was behind it all, despite the mountains of evidence proving otherwise. But reality didn't care about his denial. The business couldn't survive the damage. Suppliers had cut ties, clients had walked away, and with so many assets frozen or seized by authorities, there was no way forward. It shut down completely, leaving my father and several relatives without jobs. That was when the inheritance war began. The remaining family members who had stood by my uncle weren't just angry, they were desperate. With no business left to support them, they started fighting over what was left. There were lawsuits, backroom deals, and accusations flying from all directions. But without my uncle's stolen money to keep things afloat, they were scrambling for scraps. And my father, he wasn't just dealing with financial ruin, he was being investigated. He was never officially charged, but authorities looked into his involvement. How much did he know? Did he help cover anything up? Nothing concrete came out of it, but his reputation took another hit. Even the people who once stood by him started keeping their distance. The relatives who had blindly defended my uncle suffered the worst. They had trusted him, invested their own money in schemes he had promised would pay off. Now, with the truth out and the money gone, they were left with nothing. Some lost their homes, others tried to recover through legal action, but they were too late. One by one, they started disappearing from family gatherings. The once tight-knit family my father had been so desperate to preserve was gone. Then my mother called. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't try to justify what had happened. She just admitted the truth. She had known something was wrong for years. She had seen small inconsistencies, overheard conversations that didn't make sense. But she had been too afraid to act, too afraid to question it. She had let it happen. She didn't expect forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. My older brother, he didn't speak to me again after the sentencing. He made his stance clear. He would rather have been poured together than see the family destroyed. It didn't matter that the family was already rotting from the inside. In his mind, I had made the choice to end it, and for that, he would never forgive me. I let him go. I stopped waiting for my father to come around, stopped hoping that he would one day understand that I wasn't the villain in this story. Instead, I started over. I found a new job, one that had nothing to do with the family business. I worked hard, built something for myself, free from the toxicity of my past. And my younger sister, she moved out. She cut ties with my father, distanced herself from the family drama, and started her own life. Then came the final message, a short email from my father. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just one last attempt at control. Will you finally come to your senses? I didn't respond. I blocked him, and that was it. The family's reputation was in ruins. The people who had sided with my uncle were now ostracized. My name, the one they had spent so long dragging through the mud, was finally cleared. For years I had been desperate for their approval, for their acceptance, but now I didn't need it anymore. Losing them was painful, but it was necessary. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Word spread fast. My father was struggling financially. Without my uncle's stolen money propping him up, the cracks in his finances became impossible to ignore. The once proud businessman, The man who had spent years looking down on others now found himself on the verge of losing everything. But instead of accepting reality, he did what he always did. He fought. The inheritance war that had been simmering for months took a different turn. With most of the money gone, the fight was now over property, family heirlooms, and whatever assets hadn't been frozen. My father and the remaining family members who had defended my uncle tried to claim what was left of his assets, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. But the law was against them. With my uncle's money either frozen or long gone, there was nothing to inherit. The courts blocked any claims. My father and his allies had gambled on the idea that there would be something left, but there wasn't. Then I got another unexpected call from my mother. She was tired. The years of denial, the blind loyalty to my father, the weight of everything that had happened, it had finally caught up to her. She was considering divorce. She admitted something I had suspected for a long time. My father hadn't just ignored my uncle's embezzlement. He had known about it for years, and worse, he had benefited from it. My father had let my uncle siphon money from the business because he had been getting his share. That lavish lifestyle he clung to, the expensive vacations, the luxury cars, the connections he had built in high places, it had all been funded by stolen money. He knew, and he let it happen. It explained everything. Why he had defended my uncle so aggressively, why he had refused to even look at the evidence, why he hated me so much for exposing the truth. It wasn't just about family loyalty, it was about his own self-preservation. When my younger sister found out, that was it for her. She cut ties for good. She had been hesitant before, hoping that maybe there was something left of our father worth saving. But after hearing how deep his involvement really went, she walked away completely. My father tried one last manipulation attempt. He reached out to me. One final guilt trip, one final desperate plea. He said that I had destroyed the family, that I had ruined everything, that if I had just kept quiet, we could have moved past all of this. I didn't engage, I didn't respond, I didn't owe him anything. Then investigators uncovered one last scandal. Before the business collapsed completely, my father had tried to sell off parts of it in secret. He had been working behind the scenes, making deals, trying to cash out before everything came crashing down. It didn't work. The investigators caught it before he could finalize anything, but the intent was there. He had seen the walls closing in and had tried to save himself while letting everyone else burn. That was the final straw for my mother. She filed for divorce. For the first time, she wasn't just standing in the background watching things happen. She took action. After all those years of silence, all those years of standing by a man who had lied to her, manipulated her, and dragged her down with him, she finally walked away. My father had spent his entire life clinging to his reputation, his power, his influence, and now he had nothing. His allies were gone, his money was gone, his family had turned against him. And then came one last legal threat. A letter arrived from his lawyer, a vague warning about possible defamation charges, a desperate attempt to silence me, to make me second-guess what I had done. I ignored it. Nothing came of it. He didn't have the money, the influence, or the case to make anything stick. And then the final confrontation. We met one last time, not by my choice. He asked to see me, and for some reason I agreed. Maybe I needed to see it for myself, how far he had fallen. The man who had once towered over me, who had screamed that I wasn't his son anymore, who had fought so hard to deny the truth, looked defeated. And still he couldn't let go of his pride. He looked at me and declared that I was no longer his son, that I had ruined his life, that I had betrayed him. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked away. A few months later, he vanished from public life. No more social events, no more connections. He withdrew completely, humiliated by his role in the scandal. Meanwhile, my uncle was officially ordered to pay restitution, but the money was gone. There was nothing to recover, and finally, I let go. I had spent so much time fighting, proving, exposing, but now there was nothing left to fight. I had done everything I could. The truth was out. The people who had deserved to fall had fallen, and I was finally free. The past was behind me, and for the first time in years, I was truly free from my family's shadow. I landed a new job, a high-paying position in a completely different industry, no ties to my father's business, no lingering connections to my uncle's crimes, a fresh start, a place where no one whispered about scandals or embezzlement. My experience with finances and investigations even worked in my favor, showing I had a sharp eye for detail. Meanwhile, my younger sister packed her bags and left. She moved to a different city, determined to build a life where no one knew our last name. She cut ties with everyone still loyal to my father, refusing to let them drag her back into the mess they had created. My cousin, the one who had helped me uncover the fraud, also found success. His skills in tracking money trails and exposing corruption didn't go unnoticed. He landed a job at a firm that specialized in forensic accounting. He had used the chaos to build something better for himself, just like I had. Then came news of my father. The last of his savings were gone. Debt collectors were after him. With no business to run, no money to cushion him, and no connections left, he had nothing. The same man who had spent his life towering over others, acting as if he was untouchable, was now financially ruined. And my uncle, his last appeal was denied. There were no loopholes left, no favors to call in. He was stuck, serving a long prison sentence with no way out. The lavish life he had built on stolen money was over. Then, out of nowhere, my mother reached out. She was separated from my father, living on her own for the first time in decades. She wanted to talk. She wanted to rebuild something with me. I agreed to meet her. She didn't make excuses for what had happened. She didn't try to rewrite history. She just admitted that she had made mistakes, that she had stayed silent when she should have spoken up. But some things were too broken to be fixed. I didn't hate her. I didn't hold the same anger toward her as I did toward my father, but I also didn't trust her, not yet, maybe not ever. The family name, once respected, was destroyed. No one saw them as successful or admirable anymore. They were known for fraud, scandal, and betrayal. And then came the relatives. Some of them, the same ones who had cut me off, blamed me, turned their backs on me, were suddenly reaching out. They wanted to talk. They wanted to act like none of it had happened. I didn't fall for it. I stayed distant. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. My older brother, who had stood by my father through everything, wasn't doing well either. With the family business gone, his career had crumbled. He had tied his entire identity to my father's legacy, and now that legacy was nothing but a cautionary tale. Then came an anonymous message. Someone in the family is still looking into you. I wasn't sure what it meant. Maybe it was my father, still desperate to pin the blame on me. Maybe it was an old relative looking for a way to twist the narrative. Either way, I ignored it. I had moved on, but my father hadn't. One last attempt, one final desperate message. This time, there was no anger, no accusations, just a simple request. Can we talk? I didn't respond. I blocked him. The people who truly cared about me, who never would have blamed me in the first place, were still in my life. My sister, my cousin, my closest friends. I found my real family outside of blood relations, people who actually supported me, who didn't try to manipulate or control me. I started therapy, something I should have done long ago. Years of gaslighting, betrayal, and emotional wounds didn't just fade overnight, but I was healing. Then an invitation arrived, a distant relative's wedding. I wasn't sure why they thought I would come. Maybe they thought enough time had passed. Maybe they wanted to test the waters. I tossed the invitation in the trash. That wasn't my world anymore. For so long, I had searched for closure, but now I realized something. I didn't need it from them. I had already won. News of my father's public meltdown spread fast. People started sending me links, posts on obscure forums, bitter rants on social media, all from accounts connected to him. He was blaming everyone but himself, the government, the investigators, the ungrateful family members who had turned on him. He called it a conspiracy, claimed that I had been brainwashed, that my uncle had been framed, that the business collapse was out of his hands. He painted himself as a victim, but no one was listening. Then came another revelation. My cousin, the one who had helped uncover my uncle's fraud, found something new, a hidden bank account. It had been sitting under a fake name for years, separate from the family's business, separate from my uncle's schemes, a personal stash my father had quietly built while telling everyone else there was no money left. And it wasn't a small amount. The documents showed transactions years before the scandal erupted, withdrawals, deposits, money moved in ways that didn't make sense. It looked like he had been preparing for an escape. The moment my cousin found it, he reported it to the authorities. And just like that, a new inquiry began. Investigators stepped in again, this time focused on my father. Rumors started circulating. Some said he might be charged for hiding assets. Others believed he had simply stashed it away to avoid responsibility. Nothing was confirmed yet, but the walls were closing in on him. Then I received his final letter. It wasn't an apology, not really. A half-hearted admission of mistakes followed by another accusation that I should have done more to protect the family, that I had gone too far, that I had turned my back when I should have been the one to hold everything together. I didn't respond. I didn't even read the whole thing. I threw it away. Meanwhile, my uncle made one last desperate move, an appeal for early release. It was denied. The court ruled that his crimes were too severe, he had taken too much, hurt too many people, and no amount of good behavior would erase that. He was staying exactly where he belonged. Then came the next unexpected request. My older brother reached out for the first time since he had cut me off. He wanted to talk, but it wasn't about reconciliation. He needed money. With the business gone, my father ruined, and the inheritance locked up in legal battles, he had nothing left. He was struggling. He wanted help. I refused. He had made his choice a long time ago. The family estate, the house that had been in our name for generations, the place where so much of this had unfolded, was sold, auctioned off to pay debts. I never saw it again. Then something unexpected happened. My mother left. She packed up, moved to another city, and started fresh. Without my father controlling her, without the family name tying her down. She was free to live her own life. And my sister thrived. She built a solid career, surrounded herself with real friends, and made sure she would never fall into the same trap our family had. Then came the final blow to my father's reputation. A journalist put together a full investigative report on the entire scandal. The fraud, hidden accounts, the downfall of our once respected family. It spread fast, too fast for my father to escape, and then he vanished. No one knew where he went. He stopped showing up in public, stopped posting his rants online. Some said he moved away to escape the humiliation, others thought he was hiding until the new investigation blew over. I didn't care because, for the first time, none of it was my problem anymore. That night, I met with my sister and cousin. We celebrated, not the downfall of our family, not the destruction of what had once been, but the fact that we had escaped it. We had survived what should have broken us. And as I sat there, surrounded by the only people who had truly stood by me, I realized something. I no longer needed closure. I didn't need my father's acceptance. I didn't need my family's approval. I was finally completely free.